Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Advanced React WordPress Theme Development. In this video we're going to talk about how to create dynamic pages. So if you remember that we have already created these menus, but if you actually go onto them you don't really see anything because the pages haven't been created for them. So how do we do that? What we're going to do is basically go on to pages and then create a JavaScript file, and we will put it inside of square brackets, put dot dot dot, which means catch all the routes, and then slug, which will be dynamic. Remember, you can name this something else as you want as well. If you want, you can put it URI or whatever you can name it what you want. I'm going with slug. Okay. So we named that as slug, and then inside of that I will create a component called pages, and then inside of that I'm just going to return pages for now, and then export default pages. Okay, and then what we're also going to do is basically use a function that Next.js provides to us, which is called getStaticPath. So we'll say export asynchronous function, and it'll be getStaticPaths function. Inside of this we're going to do a query, and the query will actually be to get the pages. Okay, so to get the pages, the query will be this. So it'll be pages, nodes, ID, and URI, and if you run it you can see that we get the pages ID and the URI for the pages. Also notice some of the pages have child pages also. So if you go on to WordPress and if you go to pages, you'll notice that sample is actually the child page of about. That's why the slug of that page is about and then sample page. Okay, so consider that the slugs can not only be just one entity, it could be like a chain slug also. Okay, like so when it's a child page. Okay, so we have to take care of that. So what we're going to do is we'll write this query. So I've already written the query, so I'm just going to save some time and copy the query from here. So I'll go to queries, pages, get pages. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll go to my queries, and inside of the queries I will create a directory called pages, which I've already created, and then inside of that I'll create another file called getPages, and I'll just paste this code. Basically I'm just importing GQL from Apollo client, and I'm just going ahead and using the same query that I've written here to get the pages data, which is the URI and the ID. This should actually be called as get pages URI. Okay, that should be the name. And then once that is done, so let me just do that. And once that is done, I'll come over here, and then I'm going to say const data. So I'm going to pull data. I'll destructure it, and then await client. So we already got the Apollo client which we created, so I'm just going to use client.query, and then inside of this I'm going to pass an object. This is going to take the query, so the query will be get pages slug, sorry, pages URI, and that's it, right? And then I'm going to create an array called paths data equals empty array. This is where I'm going to put all of the paths data. And then as you can see in the response we get data.pages.node, so I'm going to loop through that when I get that as a return data. So data.pages, so data.pages.nodes, pages.nodes. If it exists, then I'm just going to loop through it. Okay, so I will say data.pages.node, oh, it's nodes actually, nodes.map, and inside of this I'm going to get the pages. Okay, and then Actually, this will be page, not pages, single page. Yep. And then inside of that, I'm going to check if the URI exists or not. So I'm going to check if not is empty, page dot URI. So I'll import is empty on top. So import is empty from Lodash. Okay, and then if it's present, then I'm just going to go ahead and say const and then slugs equals page dot URI and then dot split. So I want to split it from this particular slash, because remember that some of them will have two slugs if I use slugs, so it's a combination of slugs, so it's about and then sample page. So I want to split it from here, and then I want to remove any empty string. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. So let's say that if you're considering this, so what we're going to do is say split. I want to split it from slash and then also filter it to remove all of the empty items. So filter page slug and return page slug. So see what this does. Okay, so I'm going to copy this one and I'll show it to you. So if I just do a console here just to show it to you, and const let's say page URIs equals about slash sample page. Okay, and if I say page URIs dot split dot filter, see what happens. So you can see now it is filtering anything that's empty, because if I don't use this, if I just use this, see what happens there. I've got the empty strings here. I don't want that. So filter is going to go ahead and return false for anything that's empty. Okay, so when we do filter, so anything that's empty is going to return false, which means only the ones which have got data is going to be filled inside of the array, and that's what we need. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we will push it inside of this array that we are creating. Okay, so paths data dot push, and then it takes param. So if you check getStaticPaths paths, and if you click on it, and if you click here, so basically you need to return paths, and it should be array of the parameters. Okay, so how do we do that? So just return paths from here, from this function. Oops, just return it, and it needs an array of params. So instead of doing it over here, I'm just going to return this array over here. Okay, and I'm going to set the fallback to true, and I'll explain to you what that means in a moment. So all I'm doing the same thing. It requires an array of params like this. Okay, so consider this as our slug. All right, so in our case, so we're going to push the params, and it's going to need the slug, and then it's going to be slug. So remember, whatever name you give over here should match the name that you have provided to this particular file. So this file is slug, so it will be slug. If you name it as URI, then this needs to be URI. Okay, so it needs to match that. So just wanted to show you over here. If you go to pages, front end, pages, slugs. So I have also made some notes over here to explain to you what this means. So take a look at this node. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to pass the array of params like I just explained to you over here, right? This function getStaticPaths basically needs the array of params like so. Inside of this, if you want to achieve /foo/par, then you need to pass an array of those slugs inside of this slug. Okay, so that's what we're doing over here. If you check, we are returning the array of those slugs. So if I want to get the /about/sample page, I need to return the array of this, and that's the array that I actually need to pass to the slug. So in my case, it will be about, comma, sample page. Okay, And for everything else, if it's a single slug, it'll just be one item in the array. So that's what we're doing over here. This is going to return us this particular array, which is about sample page. I'm just giving you one example, but of course these will be different for different things, and in a moment I will show that to you by printing it as well. Okay, so that's what we're pushing, and then finally we have this. Okay, so now if we okay, so that's for creating the paths. What we also need to do is that you cannot use this function standalone. You need to use it with getStaticProps, because remember, this is only going to go ahead and create the paths for you, right? It's not going to feed the data to pages. So if you take a look at it, what does this do? If a page has a dynamic routes and uses getStaticProp, it needs to define the list of the paths that have been rendered to the HTML at build time, right? So it needs to define that. It needs to, this particular function getStaticProps needs to have the getStaticPaths. And okay, so what we need to do is we need to now define the getStaticProps, and I think I have already written that function, so I'm just going to copy that to save time. I have already explained to you how these functions work, so I'm not going to go over them over and over again. So see what happens over here. So under getStaticProps, under params, we actually get the URL. Okay, so in our case, for example, if it's going to fetch the /about/sample page, we're going to get that inside of params, and then we're just joining that. And so basically we're going to get about, and then we're going to get sample page as an array, and then we're just joining that and passing that as a variable to get the page. Okay, I also need to write the page query, so again I'm going to copy the page query for you quickly. So let me just do that. Go to front end, and then source queries pages and get page. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'll create get page over here. So get page.js, and don't worry if you find this overwhelming right now. In a moment everything will be crystal clear. Okay, so remember that we need the header menu and the footer menu on all the pages. So rather than writing the query again, we're just going to import it from get menus. So in get menus, remember we had created this header footer. Okay, so we just need to export it. So export default, sorry, export const, and that way we can use the same query. It's just going to, so think of this piece of code gets pasted over here. Think of that like that. Okay, so instead of writing this whole header, footer, all of these query like so, yeah, and making it dirty, I'm just going to use this particular constant and just automatically going to replace that value over here. And then if I want to update anything in the header, footer query, I can do that in one place rather than going ahead and making those changes everywhere. Okay, great. So that's that. So you got the get page query, and you've got the menu fragment as well. And make sure whenever you use this, you also need to use the menu fragment, because remember that this is using a menu fragment. So if you don't use the menu fragment into your query wherever you are using header, footer constant, it's not going to work. Okay, awesome, great. I couldn't have pasted the fragment here because the fragment needs to go after the query is finished, which is here. Okay, awesome. So we've got the get page also, and I'm going to just get it properly. So get page like so, and then it finally gets imported on top, which is great. And the next thing we do is pull the data over here. Okay, and I'm just going to do a console of data. Okay, and there's one more thing if you're wondering what this fallback is, right? So let me explain that to you, what this fallback is. So if the fallback is true, the behavior of the getStaticProps function changes. Okay, so the path returned from the getStaticPaths will be rendered to the HTML at build time, and the paths that have not been generated at build time will not result in 404 page, which means in case if you create a new post or a new page, in our case, in this situation, it's the page we are talking about. If you create a new page, you don't have to rebuild, unlike Gatsby, wherein if you create a new page, you have to rebuild. And this works freaking amazing with getStaticProps because validate. Because in using revalidate, we can we can go ahead and ensure that Next.js regenerates the page in the background and keeps it updated with the data so that the users can get fresh data after the first request. So that is going to take care of our data is never stale that the user sees, except the first request, of course. And this fallback true is going to ensure that if we create a new page, the user will still be able to see it. Of course, there will be a loading behavior first. There will be a loading, and then finally you will get that data. So you have to make sure that you have to use loading. So I'm just going to use that here. So I'm going to use the router. I'm just going to import the use router from Next.js on top. So what this is going to do is till the time the page is not generated, it's going to use the fallback. So you have something available inside of the Next.js router called fallback. So if the fallback is true, which means that if this value is true, then it's just going to show the loading until that particular page is created. Okay, so I will show that to you in action also. Now let's refresh, and if I now go to about page, you can see that it says pages. Okay, you also have something available called router.query. I think let me just console the router. Okay, what do we get inside of the router? So inspect element, take a look. Inside of router you have something called query, right? And then you also have the slug, correct? So what I'm going to do is over here inside of query.slug, I'm just going to console that here. Okay, yeah, so router.query.slug.join. So now if you check, it's going to say about, right? If you go back and you go to sample page, see what happens. Can you see? It says about/sample page, which is really amazing. You get that value dynamically. So see what happens if I create a new page. So if I go over here and I create a new page and I name it as test page, I publish it, I'll go back to the home page, and of course I have not put that in the menus, it won't show, but I want to show you that that page will still be available. So if I go to test page, hit it, see, you got the test page, isn't it? So this is definitely working perfectly fine. Now I want to show you the beauty of this fallback. Okay, so this fallback functionality, you'll be able to see it when the build has already happened. So let me show that to you. So let's say I run npm run build and npm run start. What this is going to do is this is going to build all of the pages that are already available. And once that is built, I'm going to create a new page. Of course, that page wouldn't have been built because it wasn't available at the time of doing the production build. So you can see that these are the pages that are generated. You've got special journey, inspiration, memories, and all of that stuff. And I'm going to go to page 3000, and now I'm going to add a new page. So think of this as your production environment, right? Because we run the npm run start after building. So let's say I name this as test page and see what happens. See the magic, okay? This is one of the things I love about Next.js, and it's really amazing. If I refresh the page, of course I don't have to refresh, but if I go to test page, hit it, see you got loading, and then immediately you got that page, right? And this is absolutely amazing. I mean, just think about it. You don't have to worry about updating the you don't really have to worry about rebuilding if you create a new page or a post, right? So if I change it now, if I change the title, and if I go to test pages, still works. Yeah, awesome, great. So that's that. Now I'm going to talk to you about the slugs that it's generating. So notice what this is doing over here, right? It is using that dynamic route that is ..slug, and is creating these pages, right? So if you see GraphQL IDE, and if you see that that's a special journey page, then you have the inspiration, you have this inspiration, and then you have the memories and 7 more parts. Of course, it's not showing that, but it is definitely available. Okay, so it's creating all of those pages dynamically because we are using the getStaticPaths, right? So this is really helping us create that, and because we are returning those paths from here, that's why it's able to do that. And this fallback is actually ensuring that we don't have to rebuild, and Next.js will create that page for you. And what this is going to happen is over here is that until that getStaticProps is resolved, until this is resolved to get the new page data, it's going to show loading. That's what's happening here. Now I'm going to console out these slugs for you to show you what's inside of them. So I'm going to stop this, say npm run dev, and the first thing I'm going to do is just console out the page URI just to show you what's inside of this, and then I'm going to console the slugs also. Okay, so see what happens. So page URI, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you that in the URI you have all of these URIs available, right? Inspiration, memories, and all of that. So look at the terminal. I'm going to just refresh the page. You can see that under the page URI you've got all of these slugs available: test page, special journey, inspiration, memories, and that's what I told you about, right? At this point, because it's a it's a child page, we have to split it. So that's what we're doing over here. We are splitting it with the slash, and then we are removing any empty items. So see what happens here. If I console slugs, see what happens. So you can see it's an array, right? So it's an array, and this one now it's got split about sample page, and that's what I had shown you just a while ago. Correct? Where is it? This one. Okay. So this is it. So this has gone ahead and created those slugs, and that's the format in which we need to pass the params. So if you check the paths, it needs the params in form of an array. So you can see it needs all of the paths. So all of the paths. Okay, in fact, let me just console out the paths data just to show you what's happening there. So console paths data. Okay, I'm going to refresh. Take a look, right? So getStaticPaths says that return the fallback and then also the paths, and make sure the paths need to have an array of the params. Okay, so in our case, okay, so take a look, array of params, right? So this is the array that we are looking for, and take a look. So this is the array. So think of this as actually paths. You can also name it as paths, because that's what we are passing as paths, yeah? So now refresh. So it needs params, and then this will be a slug. These are slugs. So take a look. Paths, params. Yeah, paths, params. And then I want slug because here they have named this as an ID, but we have named this as slug, right? This is slug that we have named it as. So that's why the name is slug, and then it's an array inside of it. So in their case, they were not using multiple paths after this, not catching all the routes, but in our case we are catching all the routes. So that is why we need to have a form of an array. Okay, awesome, great, perfect. So that's that. I hope that is clear to you. If it doesn't, you can put a comment and ask any questions you may have. And just to let you know, over here we're just getting the menus, and I think we should also get the other stuff. We should get the header and the footer as well. Okay, so header and then footer as well. Okay, perfect. And okay, so now when we console the data, and if I go to test page, okay, you can see that we've got header, footer, we've also got the page information, test page, and all of that, right? And if I go back, if I go to about, okay, so if I go to about, I also get the page information about and the menus and the header and footer, which is great. Perfect. So that's what we are passing from here. So if I console the params, see what we get in the params, okay, in the getStaticProps. So first of all, I'm going to remove the console, this one, and just refresh. See, in the params I'm getting slug, and then I'm getting in the array I'm getting about. So what I'm doing over here is that I'm saying that params, which is this, dot slug, okay, slug, this one. Take a look at this one. Let me remove any other console I might have. I'll remove this. Okay, and then about. So it's just joining that and giving me that URI. So brilliant, awesome. And if you query any of the pages, let's say about like this, you can see you get the about information. Yeah, great, perfect. So I hope you did like the video. If you did, please give a thumbs up and do subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. And do follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is imranhsayed. And do star my repository like all the beautiful 27 people have. And if you have any questions, you can leave it in the comment box. Perfect. So take care. I'm going to see you in the next video. Thank you very much.